Hello recruits, Cosmic Crow MC here. First and foremost, it feels very strange to say that opening line in one of these episodes of Pet Torture. However, it is a special occasion. 2 years have passed since I began torturing PewDiePie's pets to advocate for a cave update. 2 years. That's a whopping 730 days. 730 days of mangling one YouTuber's pets to fight for an update to a game. As ridiculous as that is, it's also quite impressive. A lot can happen in 730 days, even if you're only supposed to be beating up pets. Throughout this series, many events have unfolded as I've tortured the pets. Some of these were minor slights, while others put the fabric of reality in danger. To celebrate 2 years of torment, I've decided to cover these events in chronological order, all in an attempt to portray just how much these pets and I have been through. Before I get to my personal experiences, there's a brief bit of history I must give. Long ago, when the world of Minecraft formed, a large spire was born, known as the Obsidian Pinnacle. In the heart of the Obsidian Pinnacle was a relic known as the Orb of Dominance. The orb had a very powerful effect on the nearby environment, and slowly transformed a small patch of beetroot into a sentient hive mind of power-hungry plants, the Beetroot Council. The Beetroot Council didn't know where their power came from, but they did know that they wanted more. When a wandering villager took some of the beetroot to their village, the Beetroot Council realized that they gained power through growing new council members. More beetroot meant more force. Unbeknownst to the Beetroot Council, a flock of sheep wandering around the Obsidian Pinnacle accidentally stumbled across the Orb of Dominance. The orb called the sheep towards it, but once the sheep touched it, they were severely burned by its raw power. They quickly retreated into the sea to relieve their agonizing burns, but they too gained sentience. They decided to keep the orb to study its properties, but they had to stay submerged in water to protect themselves from its immense energy. This was the beginning of the Council of Water Sheep. At this point, there were two extremely powerful councils. Both had power derived from the Orb of Dominance, but only one had the orb in their possession, and by extension, the upper hand. June 21st, 2019 was a special day for Minecraft. It was on this day that PewDiePie returned to the game for his so-called Gaming Week. This brought newfound attention to both Minecraft and PewDiePie. The water sheep stumbled across PewDiePie first. They quickly realized his potential as an influencer, and tried to earn his trust. Not long after, the Beetroot Council caught on, and they too tried to tempt PewDiePie away from the water sheep and onto their side. In the end, the water sheep were successful, and the Beetroot Council was banished. The Beetroot Council had lost their greatest chance at gaining influence and were losing hope in the war. This is where I come in. For months, I had been working on a special machine that could be used to tunnel into other worlds and timelines. I used this machine to look for a cave update in another world, but I simply couldn't find one. On one of my excursions, I found the Beetroot Council. They hadn't seen a player in a very long time, and they were curious as to what I was doing. After telling them about my goals, they claimed they could help me. They knew how to access PewDiePie's world, and they said that if I could use my machine to go there, steal some of his pets, and torture them to satisfy the Beetroot Council's vengeful nature, we could use PewDiePie's influence to advocate for a cave update in my own timeline, as opposed to hopping around reality. It was a strange plan for sure, not to mention morally bankrupt, but at this point I was desperate. I quickly tunneled into PewDiePie's timeline to steal a few of his pets. Unfortunately, I wasn't careful enough. While stealing one of the pets, I accidentally let one die. I hastily went back in time to fix my mistake, but because I wasn't careful, I caused a tear to appear in the fabric of reality, which began to spread. The Beetroot Council were upset, but they claimed they had the ability to hold off the spread of the tear. They were successful for the first couple months, and I tortured the pets as planned. Some of PewDiePie's pets were corrupted by the tear, so the Beetroot Council sent me to retrieve them from corrupted pockets of reality. It was this jumping between worlds that eventually led the corruption to reach me, so the Beetroot Council helped me escape into the Nether while they stayed in the overworld to continue combating the tear in reality. The Watership Council was soon affected by the corruption. They traced the source to my machine, and used their own power to overpower the corruption and investigate. Once they found out the Beetroot were involved, they sabotaged my torture device supply chain and tricked me into destroying my torturing operation with a rogue Wither. The Wither was fierce, and by accident, it reopened the portal between the overworld and the Nether, allowing the corruption to consume me and the pets I had stolen from PewDiePie. The Beetroot Council and Watership Council both eventually repaired the corruption, but the Beetroot lost ground to the Watership trying to recover the pets and I. The Beetroot Council revealed to me the locations of various Watership outposts. These small bases were dedicated to protecting PewDiePie's pets. Luckily, the Beetroot Council helped me conquer the outposts and collect the pets within. As I slaughtered the Watership, they began constructing hidden bunkers to secure PewDiePie's pets. Luckily, I found a map with the locations of these bunkers, and was able to find even more pets. After clearing out all the bunkers on the map, the Beetroot Council guided me to the Watership Council's primary base of operations, their mountain outpost. It was this outpost that contained the pets the Watership recovered from the ordeal in the Nether. I slowly made my way through hordes of Watership in the mountain outpost. I eventually reached the throne room, which housed the leader of the Watership, Jeb. Right when I thought I was going to win, Jeb revealed a reconstruction of my portal machine that the Watership Council had been developing. As soon as the machine turned on, Watership poured in from all corners of reality. The Beetroot Council and I were no match for their overwhelming numbers. I was thrown in prison, and forced to watch the Watership consume the Beetroot as a symbol of their dominance. But after eating a member of the Beetroot Council, the Watership learned that they could gain immense amounts of power by consuming Beetroot, as opposed to simply killing them as they had done for many years. This led to an army of giant Beetroot-hungry Watership that roamed the world. Shortly after I was left alone in my prison cell, the Beetroot Council made a portal to their emergency base in the Nether for me. Knowing it wouldn't be long before they were found, the Beetroot Council began sending me to other dimensions to torture PewDiePie's pets. As the Watership Council pursued us, we were forced to regularly hop between various dimensions to avoid getting captured. The Beetroot Council's numbers were dwindling, and we were running out of places to run. We went as deep into reality as we could go, but we were eventually surrounded by the Watership Council. Luckily, the Beetroot Council had one last trick up their sleeve. It was a glitched artifact formed by the corruption of the world, and it was called Journey's End. Using Journey's End, I was able to escape into my own pocket of reality for a short time. Unfortunately, the only way to escape and take out the Watership was to consume the last of the Beetroot Council. Reluctantly, I ate the Beetroot and gained the power to transport myself to the overworld and kill the giant Watership, including Jeb himself. As it turned out, Jeb was the one who held the Orb of Dominance, and now it was in my possession. Even though I couldn't wield the Orb of Dominance without years of training, it was nice to have. I returned to the Beetroot Council's pet storage bunker to torture the pets that hadn't been found by the Watership while I was traveling between dimensions. Eventually, I got bored of torturing the same pets, so I invented a device to track down some of PewDiePie's pets I hadn't found previously. These pets had been locked away in temples across the world, but I managed to find quite a few of them. At one point, I was led into the Nether. The device pointed me to Alabama, who had been held in the Beetroot Council's emergency Nether bunker. As it turned out, there was one last member of the Beetroot Council barely clinging to life. The easiest way back into the overworld was through a portal that led to the Watership's mountain outpost. At the time, the Beetroot Council and I thought it was empty, but unfortunately, there were some Watership who were still alive. Upon encountering the Watership, they sensed that the Orb of Dominance was in my possession. Without hesitation, the Watership stole the orb from me and quickly began to regain their lost power. The Beetroot Council and I had no choice but to escape back into the Nether. While there, the Beetroot Council concocted a plan. It was for me to use the Nether to find a portal to their home village. They claimed their local library had a book about retrieving the Orb of Dominance. After reaching the Beetroot Council's home village, the book had a list of various artifacts that we needed to construct a beacon that would attract the Orb of Dominance, therefore ripping it from the clutches of the Watership Council. Unfortunately, the Beetroot Council was very small, and I had to wait on the Beetroot Council to regain their strength so they could transport me to the first artifact's location. While waiting on the Beetroot to regain their energy, Minecraft Live 2020 was broadcasted. In the event, they announced that the next major update was going to be called the Caves and Cliffs update. As excited as I was, the update was not released, and wouldn't be out until the summer of 2021, so I couldn't end the series yet. Nevertheless, my hopes were as high as ever. Shortly after the cave update announcement, the Beetroot Council transported me to PewDiePie's world to obtain the first item, the emerald base of the beacon. After retrieving the emeralds, our book told us that we had to make a sacrifice to find the location of the next artifact. For the first time in the series, I willingly killed one of PewDiePie's pets. After killing the pet, I saw a vision that told me where the next artifact was. The Beetroot Council and I made our way to a village that held a gateway to a bastion that protected the heart of the Nether, which would be the power source of our beacon. The last artifact we needed was purpur, an ancient material hidden in the depths of the overworld. While mining for purpur, the Caves and Cliffs snapshots began to be released, signaling that the series was nearing its completion. Once enough purpur was obtained, the book told us to travel to the Obsidian Pinnacle, which the Beetroot Council were able to guide me to with ease. Unfortunately, we ran into a problem when we arrived. The Watership had migrated to the Obsidian Pinnacle to unlock the true potential of the Orb of Dominance. I rushed up the large landmass in a desperate attempt to stop the Watership before they became any stronger. They cornered me at the top of the Obsidian Pinnacle. In one last act of desperation, I tried to construct the beacon then and there, but it was too late. The Watership used the Orb of Dominance to control me and push me off the edge of the cliff. Before I hit the ground, I used a spare Totem of Undying that I had received from the Beetroot Council to survive my fall. At this point, I was so determined to defeat the Watership that my own willpower was stronger than the Orb of Dominance, so I finished the beacon and stole the orb back from the Watership. The Watership fled, and the Beetroot Council brought us back to their base of operations. After a couple of weeks of torment, the Beetroot Council suggested that I find more of PewDiePie's pets. Ever since the Watership had stolen back the Orb of Dominance, they had built new outposts to protect the pets. I traveled to the Watership's mountain outpost one last time to search their records room for documents regarding the placement of PewDiePie's pets. To my surprise, there were no Watership there, and we were able to find the locations of the new pets. The Beetroot Council began to focus their efforts on expanding across the world, both to gain power and to search for outposts. As they were found, the Beetroot Council guided me to them. At one point in my journey between outposts, the new cave generation was implemented. The Beetroot Council took me to one of the new caves, and I was absolutely amazed. The cave update was well on its way to being released. At long last, I approached the Watership outpost holding Sven, PewDiePie's favorite pet. But as I stepped into the building, the floor fell out from under me, making me fall into a cell created by the Watership. They had successfully trapped me. Before they could steal the Orb of Dominance back once again, I destroyed it, even though I knew it was a dangerous move. The Orb of Dominance had held the world together with its will, but now it was gone, allowing reality to unfold and become scrambled. The Beetroot Council then had a crazy idea. If I could plant them in enough parts of the new, broken reality, they may be able to use the root systems to put everything back together. It was going to take a lot of beetroot, but it was just crazy enough to work. After weeks of planting beetroot, I ran into the Watership Council once more. They were trying to seize control over the world as well. I couldn't let them win. The Beetroot Council used the energy they had to rearrange reality repeatedly, allowing me to quickly find and kill the Watersheep Council members. With the Watersheep gone, the Beetroot finished restoring the world, and could now control every last chunk of the overworld with their vast root systems. They turned their efforts towards finding the pets that had been scattered throughout reality in all the chaos. The Beetroot Council gave me a new torture chamber inside the Lush Caves biome. By now, it was clear. The cave update was right around the corner. Or so I thought. A few weeks later, some terrible news was broken. To ensure that the massive Caves and Cliffs update met Mojang Studios' standards of quality, it was broken into 2 parts, and the cave update, in full, was delayed until the holiday season. This news made me extremely upset, and I wound up harming the Beetroot Council as a result. Luckily, they were quick to forgive me, and they continued sending me new pets to torture. While the Beetroot Council was finding pets, the last surviving members of the Watersheep Council hid away and tried to communicate with me in secret. They were trying to warn me about the Beetroot Council's history of betrayal, but I did not believe them. At one point, the Beetroot Council constructed the largest torture chamber yet, and sent me there without following me. Being away from the council felt strange, but I trusted them. After a couple weeks, the Watersheep Council came to my torture chamber and tried once more to convince me that the Beetroot Council was going to betray me. After my continued skepticism, they left to find the Beetroot Council on their own, and prove that they were up to no good. The Watersheep soon returned to me, claiming they had seen something horrific. I reluctantly followed them, only to find a massive cluster of beetroot surrounding a village. Not wanting to arouse suspicion, I turned the Watersheep into the Beetroot Council. The Beetroot were shocked to see me, but grateful for my loyalty. They informed me that their control over the world wasn't enough for them. They said they wanted to control life itself. It was then that I saw villagers that had been infected by the Beetroot Council, completely under their control. The villagers were hard at work planting more beetroot. My timing was perfect. The Beetroot Council had the necessary number of members to perform a grand expansion event in which beetroot began to spread across the world like wildfire. At that point, they no longer needed the villagers, but they kept controlling them for their own pleasure. Shortly thereafter, the Watersheep I had turned in were killed. As far as I know, that was the last of them, so now there's nothing left to stop the Beetroot Council. This brings us to today. With near limitless power, the Beetroot Council continues to expand at breathtaking speed. They've been spending their time looking for PewDiePie's pets and spreading across the world. Pretty soon, they'll begin expanding into other timelines, and before too long, they'll be the ultimate life form. The past 2 years have definitely been a lot crazier than I first expected. I went into this thinking it'd be a few months of lighthearted beatdowns, but I now see just how wrong I was. I can only hope that the remainder of the series is calm and doesn't put the whole of reality at stake. Again. I do have my concerns regarding the Beetroot Council's immense power. However, they haven't shown any signs of turning on me, and once I'm finished with the series, I won't have to worry about them anyway. As of now, we're 5 short months away from the announced release date of the full Cave update. It's been a long ride, and assuming the release date doesn't get moved back again, it's very reassuring to know that it will all be over somewhat soon. I thank you for following my journey of pet torment thus far, and I'll see you tomorrow for another day of torturing PewDiePie's pets until the Cave update. Goodbye, recruits.